Well, coasters, and to all those grounded Kiwis out there, nearly 30,000 of them in Australia. You know, there's 1 million Kiwis live offshore. Isn't that amazing? 30,000 of them want to come home, but they've been told by our government that their passport, which guarantees them the right to enter and to leave, is not going to give them that protection. They've been told that the Bill of Rights no longer stands. This government has decreed 22 months ago that they will make the decisions. Bill of Rights, forget about that. Forget about your democratic rights, the value of a New Zealand passport. Forget about all that. Because, hey, that elite little team of 5 in Wellington have said, no, we're going to lock them down. Don't want them back till we're ready. Disgraceful. Disgraceful. Today, I'm interviewing Phillip Ewan. Now, he's got a range of views. He's slightly different to a number of the other interviews I've done, but very experienced. Talking about delays in supply of product, inflation and the impacts that it has, the lack of servicing of freight trucks for New Zealand, or freight ships for New Zealand. The fact that professionals, the second they get the chance, will bail out of New Zealand, something we can't avoid. As Phillip said, it's really easy to get the general population as a herd heading in the same direction. And you do it with fear. You do it by not giving them the full story. You do it with a PR team. And the best part about that is that when the pendulum goes the other way, it goes very rapidly, and there'll be a lot of people heading in that direction. You can see it now in the polls. Well, look, let's meet Phillip Ewan. He's an interesting guy. Okay. Well, coasters, good evening, and what a glorious coast day it's been. Absolutely fantastic. Now, grounded Kiwis, as you know, I've been pushing hard to talk to as many people as I can about their experience, and just to get a feel for whether there's something we can do to help them come home, whether we can identify a problem. And I've got now hundreds of emails, and some of the stories, it's fair to say, bring a tear to your eye. Now, today's guest is Phillip Ewan. Phillip, thank you so much for joining us. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
Phillip, you're a New Zealand resident.
Yep.
What's your experience? Well, first of all, what's your background? Where have you been living?
Well, we've been in Whangarei for the last several years, up in the Whangarei Heads, and we sold our house up there in December 2020.
Beautiful place, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful place. And we're trying to move to Queenstown.
How long's it taken so far?
Well, the best part of 18 months, really, because we came back here to Australia for family. You know, my dad's gone into a home and stuff, so we came back to sort all that out in March, and we've been here ever since.
So did you ended up getting caught by the lockdowns?
Yeah, we planned to come back literally, you know, days before the flights were shut. You know, the green flights were shut.
So, in the process of in your situation,
yeah,
you'll be trying to get through the MIQ system.
Well, just to see what would happen, because we're Australian citizens.
Yep.
So just to see because, you know, there's talking to anybody on the phone hasn't been very productive. So just to see what would happen, we signed up for it to see if we'd be allowed to actually enter. And we are, evidently. I mean, we got the tick without using our Australian passport, and my partner's Estonian passport, actually. She's now got an Australian passport. I tried the Australian passport, but that didn't work. So obviously there's some kind of record in there, in the system, that you've been in the country, or I don't know, you know, who knows how it works really, but something like that. So, but I mean, it's kind of futile to, it's just an exercise in frustration. I mean, when I was there was 9,500 people in front of me, you know, and we haven't got the urgency that a lot of people have to get back to New Zealand. You know, ours is just, we want to build our house, and we're just stuck, basically. I mean, the problem is life's on hold, because, you know, we say, okay, well, what are we going to do now? Well, you know, will we sell the place? Will we, you know, what are we actually going to do? This is the problem. This is the uncertainty. And
so you have, if you have bought land in Queenstown, going to build down there, it sounds like a substantial investment.
Yeah.
And you've been a permanent resident in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And now you're locked in Australia and can't get back to build your house, which I guess is tied up with your retirement or something similar.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, yesterday, actually, we talked about selling it. You know, we thought, well, maybe we'll just ditch that and not go back, you know, I mean, not proceed with it. But, you know, we kind of went over and thought, oh, well, it's probably, you know, we'll stick to the plan and hope for the best, kind of thing. But
Philip, you've travelled down from Whangarei through the west coast here, I know, and down to Queenstown. You're very experienced. What's your observation of the tourism sector at this stage?
Well, there's this. I mean, this was in February, March 2021.
Yep.
Because that's the last time we were there, essentially. And as I mentioned before, you know, we're staying in the Queenstown Hilton on the lake for $79 a night for 6 weeks, waiting for the flights to open. We drove down the west coast 2 or 3 times. You know, every second small operation has got a for sale sign up on it. The helicopter you know, the helicopters up onto the glaciers, they're running on about, you know, 15% of capacity. I mean, I don't know how they're keeping going at all. You know, it's half price up to the glacier, and you know, there's still that. Well, in February there was still 2 or 3 operators, but there were very few customers.
It's still very similar today, a year and a half later.
Yeah.
Which is,
you know, as we met, you know, the problem is, you know, I mean, New Zealand has always had a bit of a skill shortage, and now we've got people, you know, who are supposed to be maintaining helicopters, you know, working as, you know, window salesmen and this sort of business. And, you know, where are these skills going to go? I mean, they're probably all going to head to Australia, is probably what's going to happen, is my theory, but I might be wrong.
I think you're probably bang on. They will head offshore. And, you know, so from a practical point of view, what do you think government's plan is? I mean, we appear to be in a very difficult situation where the outlooks, there doesn't seem to be any certainty in it. Do you have any views on that? Do you have do you have a plan that we can convey to the government and say, look, hey, guys, there's a better way?
Well, we've lived through it here. We've lived through it we were in New Zealand when the first lockdowns came in, and we're in the country, so it didn't really affect us. But then we've lived through the situation here in New South Wales. And I mean, the toll of this, even in New South Wales, where things have been relatively, there's been modest controls. The controls haven't been anywhere near the kind of severity that the controls in New Zealand have been. But, I've got elderly friends who, one friend of mine, she literally, apart from going to the supermarket, she hasn't left the house for 2 years,
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, she'd normally go on a trip. If you've got nothing to look forward to for an elderly person, there's not much, that one trip away each year is what keeps them going, and they look forward to it, they plan for it, and, they might only go away for a week or 2 weeks, but that's the big event of their year. And when you can't do that, or do anything for that matter, it's a big toll. And this is not being factored into the equation. There seems to be a lot of fear mongering going on and exaggeration.
Yeah, well, I think we've got people who have been spreadsheeting the claims that are made by the health experts, and the dates, and I don't think we've seen one that's turned out to be correct. And now, of course, we're moving into Omicron, and for something that's very similar to a mild flu, we seem to have an enormous amount of fear being generated. Is that the same in Australia?
No. I mean, I've got several close acquaintances and friends who, they send me a message and say, oh, the gardener just told me they've tested positive, and, I mean, it's just like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll just roll along with it. There's a few protocols which are fairly, you register your thing and you're supposed to stay at home and self-isolate for 5 days and off you go. But, there's certainly none of the kind of hype that's going on in New Zealand about the whole thing. I mean, I was speaking to somebody in Queenstown the other day, and they're saying, God, by what I read from the papers in New Zealand, it's a complete disaster over there, and they're just letting it go. And, but that's not how it is at all. I mean, this is a big Sydney. We're in Sydney, a big city of over 5 million people, more than the population in New Zealand. It's a lot more difficult situation to manage. And, because of the population density. And, I mean, I think it's been done pretty well, actually. Looking at my partners from Estonia, they've got their own set of problems over there with vaccine hesitancy and, the close connections to Europe. But, I think in New South Wales, I've always said, it's kind of the goals, they said the gold standard, but it kind of is in a lot of respects the way it's been handled here. I think, it's, if you look at all the different options, I think what they're doing here is pretty reasonable.
In New South Wales?
Yeah, in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the thing that worries me, and the thing that got me interested in the grounded Kiwis, was the horror stories. And people a year later still trying to get back into the country, and people with a New Zealand passport, protected by the Bill of Rights. I mean, are there any Australians offshore that can't get home? Does your system ban the residents from coming home?
Well, I mean, there has been similar problems, but not to. But I mean, that was finished the end of November.
Right.
So I mean, in Australia, it was a bit different. You couldn't leave the country. So I mean, the net effect here was, well, if you're going to leave, you're going to have to come back, and so you know, we don't want people leaving. I don't know if you're aware of how it was working here, but so I mean, these kinds of things were pretty obtrusive, but at the same time, that was at the height of it, and you know, before vaccines and all this kind of business. So if you're going to, I mean, it was kind of logical in a sense that, well, where are you going to go anyway? You know, really, like with all this going on. But you know, that's finished now anyway.
It's a crazy world we're living in.
It certainly is.
So, when do you hope to get back to New Zealand to continue with
well,
your project? You know, what's your hope?
Oh dear. I mean, hopefully it'll be next month, or not next month. What are we at? January? You know, in March. But then there's no. I mean, I suppose the real problem I have is the flip-flopping. You know, like there's nothing more deadly in government than to keep changing your mind. You know, and that's what they seem to be doing in New Zealand, which is, you know, it's just corrosive, you know, because I mean, I'm just an individual trying to go and spend, you know, a bunch of bucks in Queenstown to build my house, you know, but if you're in business or in some kind of enterprise, that uncertainty is deadly. And I think that is, you know, if you wanted to hang them out to dry on anything, it would be in the uncertainty that they've created. You know, the lack of ability for anybody to make any plans. You know, for me, I get up in the morning and I read the news and I go, oh, nothing's changed. We're still in Groundhog Day. You know, what's going to happen next? And then after 1 month, and it does weigh on your mental health. You know, it does, because you basically, even like, it's not as if I'm going back to family. I'm just, you know, that's just a decision. We've decided to go and live in New Zealand. But, you know, for somebody who's got family involved, I mean, we were on the other side stuck there. So that was a problem. I do understand it from that perspective. But from somebody who's going back to family, it's a lot more devastating. But the uncertainty, it really plays on people's mental health, and the seemingly inability for anybody in the government to address it, actually directly address it and say, this is what we're going to do. This is our way out of this. This is the reality. The healthcare system, we know it's inadequate. You know, like just somebody get up there and spell it out and say, this is what is actually going on. But we've got to look at all of these people in New Zealand who spent their blood, sweat and tears getting this place where it is. And we've got to make sure that that is not overly compromised. But there is no, you know, it's like we're dealing with a, I don't know. I'm just beside myself. I can't even put words to it. It's like some kind of circus, you know? You know, we're making jokes about the announcements I thought that was finished, you know? No. But we're sitting here, I'm saying, my partner's saying to me, oh, what's happening now? And I'm saying, well, they announced they're going to not change the dates when you can come without MIQ. Mind you, they haven't actually told you what coming without MIQ means, what home isolation means. What if you don't actually have anything but a block of land, or What have you got to do? Can you go, there's actually I've trailed through everything. There's absolutely no worthwhile information on what they expect you to do. That's the first thing.
No plan, no certainty. Philip, what do you know about the supply chain issues that we keep hearing about? What's caused that?
Well, I don't know. I don't really know a lot about it, except that I really don't know that much about it, except I think it's more of an international issue than something to do particularly with New Zealand.
We keep hearing that even basic building supplies like jibboard, nails, delays of 3 weeks to 6 weeks to 9 weeks on getting a sheet of jibboard. It's quite.
Yeah.
It's quite
it's those kinds of problems are certainly not going to be helped when people can't travel and organize things, and have meetings and so forth. But I think it's more of what I read was that a lot of the lines just aren't servicing New Zealand anymore. So they come to Australia and then they transship across the Tasman. This is what I've read about it. But that's something which again should be the top priority of any government, because you can't, nothing can move forward if you can't get materials. And again, that's something the builders that I've been speaking to said, we can't get strapping, we can't get, this kind, like very basic items that they need to complete construction, they're just not available.
Yeah, it's quite, imagine what it's doing to the forward work planning for builders. I mean, we have a critical housing shortage, but we can't build houses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really, Bruce, I'm not really, sort of, I couldn't say I'm expert on that one, but it's certainly something that, in Australia, it's also a problem, and it's a worldwide problem at the moment. But things are moving here. Apart from Western Australia, is the sort of the black sheep. Which I think is a similar kind of, unfortunately, a similar kind of situation as New Zealand. Okay, well, we can isolate, we can afford to isolate. So, it's politically been very successful. So they just keep doing it. But it's all the little bits, it's all the little people, if you like. It's all of the structures and the foundations that get eroded by this kind of behavior. It's not something you can point your finger to and say, oh, well, somebody didn't invest $10 billion in something or whatever, that's sort of, whatever. But it's all of the micro stuff that gets destroyed by this kind of behavior. It's not something that you can actually see. It's like, as I said to somebody, I used to say when we were living in Whangarei still was going on, I said, it's like slow moving lava, and it just slowly covers everything, this kind of approach to things where you're not really considering, okay, sure, you've got to there has to be controls. There has to be controls. You can't have the virus going, uncontrolled. I agree. That's no one is, I don't think anybody in their right mind is putting that position forward. No one's saying, well, you just let it rip. That's not it. But it seems to me that there is some level of political, advantage being taken here, which I think is really, the worst of it. Because if there wasn't, why aren't the leaders in New Zealand getting up and spelling it out and saying, okay, team of whatever, we do have a problem here, and these are the problems. And this is what we have to fix. I don't hear any of that conversation. I don't hear any of it, you know. How are they going to, my daughter's just completed a degree in paramedicine, and she was saying she might go to New Zealand and work there. And I said, well, let me do a bit of research. So I contacted somebody I know who's a paramedic in Nelson, and I said, well, what's the story? And he said, oh yeah, well, you can, you know, it's good, it's a good job, it's a good thing to do here, and it's got these advantages. But then I looked into her actually getting there, and I said to her, just forget it. It's not even worth, it's not even worth thinking about, you know, like just forget it. So that's just one, you know, professional that's not going your way. So how can you increase the ICU beds when you don't have the staff or any way of getting the staff to do it? How can you actually, and this is the problem. So any oxygen this hapless lot want to give to any of these issues is soon discovered that there actually isn't any plan, because that's what it looks like. There doesn't seem to be any plan.
It's certainly not nation building, is it?
No, I mean, well, New Zealand, I've got lots, you know, well, a few friends here have come to Australia via New Zealand. It's sort of an old, you know, they've found they could emigrate to New Zealand, but they couldn't emigrate to Australia for some reason. So they go to New Zealand, they live there for a few years, and they come here. And that's, in order for getting skilled workers, that's a very important part of the equation, because no matter what happens, that's the way it's always going to be. People are going to skilled professionals and professionals are going to leave New Zealand and they're going to come to Australia. It's just there's nothing you can do about it. It's the same. It's the same in Fiji. You know, they're the skilled. They come to New Zealand or they'll come to Australia. You know, it's just the way it's going to work. There's just no way. There's no way you can avoid it. But you have to put that into your political equation. You know, you have to ensure that those people can emigrate to New Zealand. Otherwise, you can't afford, like I used to run a manufacturing business, and literally 60% of my welders were Kiwis. They were the best welders. There's no way you'd get them to go back to New Zealand, because they literally got paid twice as much, you know? And that's just the way it is. It's not going to be any different. It's never going to be any different. But once you start pulling out these foundations and not addressing them and not telling the people in the country, this is a problem. You know, why can't Jacinda Ardern get up there and tell something straight to the population in New Zealand and say, look, we have these problems. If we continue this, down this road, this is the risk we take. You know, we take the risk of undermining this, of compromising that, and this is what's happening in the country. Why can't anybody have that honest conversation?
It sounds like planning. We all get involved in it.
Well, my theory is they don't know. That is my theory. And this is my neighbor up in Whangarei, who was a farmer and obviously, but typically an arch national voter. And he said to me, we're having dinner there one night, and he said to me he said, look, you know, he wasn't sort of scoffing off at them, saying they're a bunch of idiots or whatever. He said, look, the simple problem is there aren't too many people in the government that know what they're doing, you know? And he said that's really what he was concerned about. He said, oh, you know, okay, well, I'm a national voter, but, you know, that's what worries me about this lot is that there really isn't a lot of meat in the sandwich, you know? And that does seem to be what is playing out. And it's easy to, and you can see it in Western Australia, it's easy to get the general population who's running off with their kids and, doing all the millions of things, not paying attention to what's really going on. It's easy to get the herd heading in one direction, if you scare them enough, if you give them a biased narrative and not tell them all the facts, cherry pick it. It's easy to get them all heading in the one direction. And what happens? They all head to the ballot box and vote for you because you've scared the shit out of them, basically. It's the same, exactly the same thing that's happened in Western Australia.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Well,
quite bizarre.
It is bizarre. I mean, it's almost, I don't know what the comparison is. Like people, you can say, well, the only other place that's doing this is communist China, but that's not really a good comparison. They're doing it. That's a whole different dynamic, that's a whole different dynamic, but that's the only other place that's got away with it. Somehow or other in New Zealand, they've managed to get a very high level of popular support, but okay, unemployment is low, and you've got a lot of unqualified people working in jobs that they're not qualified for. Basically, can be my only guess as to what's happening.
Look, Philip, I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat. I'd love to give it a month. I'd love to catch up again.
Okay. Well, hopefully I'll be on your side of the ditch.
Hopefully you'll be in Queenstown. That'd be fantastic. But look, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. And it's been a different interview because you come from it from quite a different angle, and I found it really, really interesting. So really appreciate it, and once again, thank you so much.
Thanks for taking the time to go through it all and listen.
We'll catch you later.
Okay, thanks. See ya.
Well, folks, what did you think of that discussion? Really interesting. It's just a discussion with a very experienced person who's looking at the bigger picture. Hey, he's looking to head to Queenstown to build a house, and no doubt it'll be a few $1 million worth. And he can't get into the country. He can't get in. He went away for a few months, and now he can't get back. And it's bizarre because across Australia at the present time, in fact, across the world, there are people in the same situation where they can't get home. They're either permanent residents or they've got a New Zealand passport, and they simply can't return to New Zealand because the government has walked away from that basic democratic right we have as New Zealanders: right of entry, right of exit, guaranteed by our passport, guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. And so this fellow's not alone. You wander up and down New Zealand. I'm now getting more emails from people in New Zealand than I get from overseas in relation to this grounded Kiwis matter, and people are talking about the fear of, look, I want to go and see the grandchildren in Australia. No problem leaving New Zealand, but they won't let me back. I could be stuck for 6 months. I could be stuck for 12 months. Now, every other country in the world is not doing this, doing a totally different way. And I'm quite sure, in fact, I'm very confident that the New Zealand government will be forced to open the borders for people to self-isolate. I don't think they'll have any choice. I mean, how logical is it for people in New Zealand with Omicron to self-isolate You know, it's going to happen, because the supply chains are going to fall apart. They absolutely are. And yet, Kiwis who live in Australia, who want to come home, they get two jabs plus a booster, a clear test before they come home, and they're not allowed to self-isolate. Go ask. Crazy world. Hey, but look, interesting interview from a totally different perspective. Quite enjoyed it. Hey, have a great night. We'll catch you later.